Good evening. Welcome to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and really the most unique news program in the world, bringing you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life. My name is Andy, and I'm operations manager here at IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway. And before we get started, right away, down below, like tonight's episode and share it widely with any fellow spiritual seekers and family and friends. Tonight's episode is about pain, chronic pain, existential pain, all types of pain. And let's be honest, pain is a topic for everyone. So even non-fellow spiritual seekers will really benefit from a higher perspective on how to manage pain. So please go ahead and share it tonight. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, IKYA.official. We're also IKYA.official on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So again, tonight's episode is about pain, and how IKYA Live works is we take a topic in the news, and pain is in and out of the news all the time, and we unpack that topic, and we take then a higher spiritual perspective and look at the principles that are involved and see if we can't, by studying the spiritual principles, learn how to better manage whatever issue it is that's at play and become like truer and better people on our spiritual path. So we're going to dive right in, and remember that tonight is also a conversation. That's one of the things that makes IKYA Live unique. So be sure to write in your questions and comments in the comments below. We also have a live studio audience tonight who will be asking questions. So let's have this be a real conversation about this topic. IKYA will teach us the principles. You come in with your questions and perspective. So let's open tonight by asking IKYA a little bit about where we're at. So IKYA, is it actually true that we humans are experiencing a lot more pain than we have in the past?
Absolutely. And, tonight we will be talking about fear, pain, stress, and suffering being part of the same complex. So we'll be talking about all of those things mixed together and sometimes separately. But yes, we are experiencing extraordinary levels of all of these things, and it's historically new, and we'll be talking about this and why it's happening, what we can do about it. Because the solution is actually very simple. Although you may have to confront yourself a little bit. Some of the things I will say today, some of you may be triggered by, which means you need to hear it. Because, when we're triggered, it simply means that we hit the right spot. So I hardly ever show any patience with people suffering, because to me it's very easy to grow past it, and I will show you how. Now, where we are at historically is that humans are going through a very strange and difficult phase, and we're in the beginning of it. It's simply because humans will have to grow out of a lot of old ways of thinking, old ways of behaving, to reach a higher level, because otherwise we're done. So we have to change. This is also part of evolution, right? The only thing that is kind of stronger than the human need to destroy everything is humans' willingness to survive, right? We only change when we absolutely have to. Until then, we drag our feet and we protest as much as we possibly can. But when it really comes down to it, we are willing to change. So in many ways, everything will be fine. It just doesn't look like it right now. But one thing you need to understand to grow out of all of these things is that you cannot compare yourself to this culture. This civilization has no solutions. All it can offer you is self-medication, corruption on all levels, and distraction, and even more pain and fear and stress and all of that. So if you want to grow out of it, you will have to stop thinking that, well, other people are doing this, they're getting away with it. Why can't I? I should be able to do this. This should work for me. You will end up with more pain and stress and fear and suffering because this is where we are at. If you want to grow past it, you will have to learn and you will have to take charge. The normal, whatever it is, does not work anymore. We do not live in a normal environment anymore, right? When you look at our civilization and where we're at, it's getting worse. So people will be more triggered. Their reaction levels will be heightened. One thing that's very important to understand is that both when it comes to fear, pain, stress, and suffering, we believe as humans that these are part of what's happening. They are not. They're all reactions, which means that you are in control and you choose to produce these states, which means you can learn to not produce them. They're not linked or connected to what is happening at all. And that is the first thing you need to understand. And you need to see it, because otherwise it's very difficult to grow past it. Because when you believe that I just react because of this, you will be trapped because yes, you are reacting, but you don't have to. They're not connected. So, I'll explain a little bit of why it works this way. And when it comes to pain, for instance, it's quite interesting because like pain, I'm talking physical, emotional, mental pain, is linked to the space you are in. It's not limited to your body. And even the pain in your body is not connected directly to what is actually happening. Your brain is making the pain up, is creating it from scratch. So it's happening in your brain, not in your body part. So if, for instance, you break your leg and you have enormous amount of pain, it's how your brain interprets what's happening, and then it produces the illusion of pain to make you stop, to make you understand this is an emergency, right? So it is a strategy, it is a survival strategy for you to cancel everything else and to focus on what can kill you, right? So the pain is simply an alarm system linked to whatever can threaten your survival. Now, but what is interesting is that because the pain is produced by your brain, you can produce pain pretty much out of anything, any reaction, any space, right? It depends on how your brain defines what you experience, what you define as your world, and what relates to you. Because once you have decided that this is important to me, this is part of who I am, this is what I focus on, it will become part of your extended body. Your life and your life spaces for your brain are part of your body. The brain does not stop here, like with your physical body. Everything you relate to in your life, it considers to be part of your body. This is part of, for instance, empathy, right? You can feel what other people are feeling because they mean something to you. If they don't mean anything to you, you will not feel a thing. It's related to how your brain interprets what is important to you, what is necessary for your survival, and the priority between all of these things, including your body. This means, for instance, that many have experienced that they may experience physical pain, and then they're doing something that requires them to perform, to do something, and the brain goes, well, this is more important now. So it stops producing the illusion of pain, the physical pain, because now the most important part of the body is the space you're in and what you're about to do. And then the pain will be whether or not you are successful at what you're doing. Once you leave that space, the physical pain is back. It's always about priority and what can threaten your survival somehow. So it means all your life spaces are bodies or part of a greater body that your brain relates to. And because of that, we produce mental pain, existential pain, emotional pain, physical pain, all of that. For the brain, it is the same because it needs different signals for you to address and deal with different issues and problems. But remember, it's only when you have defined something subconsciously as part of your extended body. Again, this is why some people, when they do something, it affects you. And then somebody you don't know will do the same thing and you will have no reaction. So part of the whole reaction thing is also for you to interact with all manifestations that are part of your growth and part of your journey. The rest, simply part of the scenery. Right? So within that, he will produce enormous amounts of different pain. And the thing is, how we live today is very different than it was 150 years ago. I read a review a few days ago. It was a book about a guy and his struggles and everything he experienced from his childhood and this and that and all these emotions and how he was not accepted and the struggles and all of that. And was enormous amounts of pain that he had to overcome and shame and all of that. And the fun thing was, I thought, like, not a single thing of any of that would have been real 150 years ago. He wouldn't even have felt it because he would have been out in the field plowing, and sowing and pulling out vegetables and whatever else. That would have been his life. So no existential crisis because you were not in that space. Now our main spaces are not farming for most of us. It's social interaction. So then we get social pains that we didn't have before. It's so much more complex, right? And the intricacy of all these dynamics and how they affect us, and we produce new types of pain that we didn't have, right? Because we are at a level of complexity in our existence that we as humans have never had before. And that's quite fascinating. But it means that the amount of things we react to are hundreds of times higher than they used to be a few centuries ago. So we go around in a constant alarm mode and we react to so many things because we think they are important to us. So this is part of the landscape we're in. But the wonderful thing about the disconnection between the production of pain and what's happening is that it gives you flexibility, right? It makes you more able to adapt because you will only have pain in whatever part that is important to you in your survival, right? And that can be anything. So as we humans continue to evolve, our brains will then start to produce even more advanced types of pain. So this is also why we have a lot of new illnesses today, a lot of sensitivity illnesses that the medical community are struggling kind of understanding. But it's because we are evolving. We are living in different types of life spaces than we used to, and the brain will see that as our body. And we just produce the pain that is necessary. This goes with fear and stress as well. It's very much the same type of mechanism. Now, I've talked about the complexity gap that we're in. Remember that all of these things, like fear and stress and all of that, used to be productive. It's why it's part of our genetic makeup. It means that being afraid was smart. When you go back in history, everything and anything could kill you every day. Being nervous, being anxious, being afraid, feeling stress, that would be a smart thing. It will help you survive those with no fear, they would die first. They would be first into battle. They would be first trying to cuddle a bear and it will eat you. It's all of that, right? So fear are basically one of the most important criteria for survival, right? And so it goes with all the other things. It's the same thing with pain. Remember that when we didn't have access to medicine, and medicine really was not a thing until 100 years ago, pain was important because you need to listen to it. If you didn't listen to your pain, you would die. So when you had the ability to listen to pain in a more sophisticated way, which means you were quite sensitive, well, you would be able to pick up on things in your body that you needed to be careful about, right? And that strategy has then been simply elevated and transformed into our different forms of social pain. But the thing is that we live in a level of complexity that is far beyond the skill set in our genetic makeup, meaning that for most of human evolution, we've lived in small groups. We've been used to not really anything happening. Our lives used to be very uneventful. We're related maybe to 50 people our whole life. Very little happened. We did the same things. And it means that when we reacted to something, it would actually be smart. It would be something that we should notice. Now we have the same amount of information in a few days that we could have during our entire lives back then. And we react to all of it. And we think everything is important. And we meet a lot of people. Things are happening in the collective spaces that we're part of, and therefore we also feel that pain. And we have so many different spaces, so many different people, so many different things, and we react to all of it. And the reaction is always about us noticing that there is a difference between ourselves and what we are reacting to. This is why we need to react, because there is something here. There is a difference, which means I'm not competent. There is something that needs to change. And evolution will tell us that you cannot change the world, you can only change yourself, right? The winners of evolution are the ones who are able to adapt to a changed environment. And because our environment now is changing all the time, it used to maybe be minor changes in your lifetime, right? Maybe something that you're used to, you had a place where you used to pick berries and, okay, well, that dried out or whatever. So you had to find a new spot for picking berries, and that would be it. Now there are constant changes, and it will trigger stress, it will trigger pain, it will trigger fear. And it happens all the time. And now, with what's happening in the world, it's even worse, and it will get worse. So, if you want to lead a happy life, you need to learn how to go beyond this. You cannot trust your genes. You cannot trust your DNA. And you can't say, well, it shouldn't be like this, because it is. We're at a point in human evolution where we've never been before. So you have to learn. You cannot just trust your instincts, because your instincts are worthless. Your instincts are what are now producing the pain and fear and stress and suffering. So we need to go beyond it. Now, one thing, okay, we have a question?
We do have, Hogne has a little bit, online he's trying to figure out that what he's curious about is he's observed that people go to great lengths to heal / grow out of pain or avoid pain. Mm-hmm. And one particular thing that people do is they go extreme vegan, vegetarian, but it often results in malnourishment and hormones out of balance, losing teeth enamel, that kind of stuff. Some people even dying of that sort of extreme imbalance. And he's curious about how does that play into this balance of managing pain, and is it possible to stop producing pain in general or suffering?
it is fully possible to stop producing pain and suffering and stress. Now, we'll be explaining that. Now, what you're bringing up is actually my next talking point, is that we need to understand that for our brain, for our DNA, life is physical. Now, we develop our kind of abstract part of the brain in our minds. That's a later thing, okay? And we have kind of the opportunity to use more of the abstract part. But in our DNA, and our like genetic makeup, everything is physical, okay? So it means that when you have an emotional problem, your body will be looking for a physical solution. This is also when you have existential pain. Your body will often try to interpret that into physical pain. And this is part of some of the new illnesses, because the reason for the pain is existential, it's emotional, it's spiritual. But the body insists on interpreting that into biological pain, because physical pain is what it understands, because then it can find a physical solution. So we will have all of these sensations, and we will try to figure out what to do. And some of those strategies can actually work. But my point of bringing this up is that often we're trying to heal our emotion through emotional work. It actually doesn't work. Because what your brain is looking for is a physical solution. Now, why is that? It's because all of these sensations you're getting are basically instructions for you to change something. Your emotions developed by a simple life form of being able to recognize, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I need to sleep, I'm afraid, right? And so it's instructions to do something concrete. And all emotions are basically helping you identify that something is wrong and you need to change it. Stress, there is a distance between where you are at and what you're experiencing, and you're lacking the skill set you need to figure out what to do about it. Fear, you are in a dangerous situation, do something about it. So, all these signals are trying to tell you to do something about it. Talking about it will not change it, because the solution for your brain is always concrete action. That's what your brain understands. So we need then to go back and look at, what is it that makes me feel this way? What is the instruction? And try to figure out, what do I need to do differently? Because that is the rule of evolution. It's how you adapt to a changed environment. All these signals are basically telling you that you're not doing it right, to master your environment. And our environment now is extremely complex, but the signals are the same. So we need to get better at mastering our lives. And that's not sitting and talking about how we feel. It's understanding what the feelings are trying to tell us that we need to do differently. Spiritual growth is a one-way street. It's a one-way adaptation. It's we, us, changing. So we gradually grow closer to reality. And when we start to look at all these signals and how we feel simply as instructions, and then the instruction is, do something about it. When we do, it's gone. Because that is what your brain understands. You have, in your home, you got a water leakage. Okay, is it productive to sit and talk about how you feel about it? Probably not. It's more efficient to fix it. Everything in life can be fixed. And sometimes it means that we have to change, because we have to grow into the change in our environment. Right? And today, because life is so complicated, we have begun to just complain about it instead. We judge, we bitch, we criticize, and we think we're doing something. Now, this behavior started way back. And when humans began forming tribes, right? This is several 100,000 years ago, okay? we began specialization. And that was the start of everything terrible, in a way, because when we form a group, we collaborate and we work together, meaning that we can specialize. And when we specialize, we get better at one thing and worse at everything else. Right? And that was the beginning of the decline of human intelligence. And we simply gotten more and more stupid as we become more and more specialized. So when we then depend on other people, because in a group we are all specialized, meaning we have to do our job and we rely on other people to do theirs. If they don't do their job, your life is at stake, but you can't do anything about it. So you can complain, you can manipulate, you can shame, you can guilt, you can do all of that, trying to make that person do what he's supposed to, and you don't even know what that is. So it started way back then. So when we don't understand what to do, we then think that we are complaining to a group member, to a tribe member, right? So when people, they feel outraged, somebody should do something, right? In their genetics, they are actually thinking that they're talking to the hunter who did not bring, anything back for the tribe, or the warrior that let an enemy enter the compounds. Because we think that since I'm specialized, this is also something specialized. So all I can do is complain, right? And now there are so many things that are not working. And we don't understand. We don't even understand our own lives. We depend on so many things. We get more and more specialized. We have less and less overview, which means from a survival perspective, we get more and more challenged because we can't do the simplest things. Just think of a car, right? A generation ago or two, one could fix one's own car. Most men knew how to fix their cars. Now we can't do anything. We have to take it, to the shop, even if you want to change a light bulb. You're not allowed to do anything yourself. And people can't really do anything. Look at your phones and gadgets. You can't fix them, right? We can't fix anything anymore. We need specialists. It means that we're vulnerable. And for that, we feel all we can do when we're afraid is to complain and hope that somebody will do their job better, but they won't. So this is also a strategy where our genetics are not updated. So what can we do about that? Be less vulnerable, right? You need to understand how to make changes in your life. You need to understand, again, when you get all these different feelings and sensations that we're talking about, it's the instruction that you need to do something differently, not someone else. You have to figure out how you can survive in this world, what changes you need to make in your life. So we need to get better at making decisions and put them into action. Most people today are terrible when it comes to making decisions. So we need to learn to make decisions and make changes for real. That will help, because then we feel less dependent. We have to basically reverse the process of specialization, where we're basically a one-trick pony, and the rest is just there, right? So becoming less dependent. I'm not saying that you should move into the forest and buy guns and grow your own food, but it's basically learning more about you. What do you actually need? How can you become less dependent on others? How can you make your own life work and become more productive? Because when we do that, we complain less, we criticize less. Because the thing is, when we notice that we criticize and when we complain, it is because we have the experience that we are under threat and we have no idea what to do about it. Right? When we feel that we're the master of our own destiny, we never complain. We never criticize. Because then what other people are doing, it's not affecting us as much, right? Because we do not depend on them. When we feel helpless, we depend on everyone. So everything everybody is doing will be affecting us emotionally. And then we will be feeling that pain and stress, and we will be complaining and bitching and moaning. But we need to look at this as a sign. It's actually an instruction. We need to change. We need to take charge. We need to figure out what it is we need to learn to make things work.
Well, directly tied to this is a little bit back to the question of, can we stop producing pain in general, but then specifically, like for example, there is a physical condition where people don't have nerve endings in their hands, let's say. So that actually happens. But then the more interesting question is, how do we navigate and grow spiritually without pain giving us signals of when we're kind of not getting it or hitting the wall?
The thing is, you need pain because it's a signal. It is how you manage your life in a modern world that is the problem. Because without pain, you would self-destruct. Because you need boundaries. You need to understand when you're doing something that is harmful to yourself or to others, right? It's the same thing with stress and fear. Fear is also when you feel there's a boundary here. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle it. Well, learn. Fix it. Because that is how you heal it. The interesting thing about often when people have experience in the past, right, they can go around in that, oh, things happened to me in my childhood, and all these feelings. What is actually happening then is that you're continuing that space. Now, understand that when something happens and you create the story of pain and what happened, that also dictates behavior. It is an explanation of how life works. And for as long as you nurture that space, you will be living in it. And then you will be living by those rules, and then you will be repeating the pain, and you will be repeating actions and manifestations that will then reinforce that story. This is why, for instance, when you were beat up as a child, you will beat up your own kids, not because you want to, but because you're living in that space. So, how do we move out of the past without having to live through it? Now, there's one trick here that once you grow spiritually, you get it. Okay, so pay attention. It doesn't mean that you're able to do it, but please try. Now, what you will understand at one point is that the past only exists for as long as you repeat it. Because then it means you're continuously manifesting and remanifesting the same imbalances. That's why it still exists, because you are repeating, you haven't learned yet. So you need the reminder of this is an imbalance. It's in you. You have this scar, you have this whatever it is, and you're repeating it. So, when you learn what it is you need to correct in yourself, in your behavior, in your life, when you have developed a skill set that you didn't have, you're not repeating the same reality anymore. Because it's about reality and level of consciousness. And all manifestation simply exists to mirror your level of consciousness. So a space that includes memory and manifestation can only be active for as long as you are repeating it. So when you then learn, when you adapt, so you are not repeating, your past will be deactivated. Because then it's not a sounding board for your actions and behaviors in the here and now. So the easiest way to heal your past is by not repeating the consciousness and behaviors part of that past. When you change, you will vibrate differently. And then that will be deactivated because you're not sending out any vibration in the here and now based on those imbalances. And then it's neutralized. Even when I tell you this, most of you will not understand it for real, because when you do, you will be able to heal anything in the past in a fraction of a second. You will get there. Anyone in deep spiritual work will discover this and understand it, and also understand how to do it. But you can still practice. It's really observing, what is this? What kind of space of reality is this? What does it represent? What are the imbalances? And how am I repeating this? Because it doesn't mean that it has to express itself through you doing the same things, but it's belief systems. It's how you see the world. It's how you think things work, and you behaving based on those rules. That's how you repeat. So it's then learning, what do I have to change in myself? Because all of this is simply life showing me that, yeah, I need to change. I was not adapted to my environment, and I have to make the change. Once I do, I vibrate differently. So we need to look at it from the point of here and now and forward, not look to the past. Simply look at the skill set that we need to change, and use the past as a sounding board. Do not believe the stories, because that will make you repeat. Only look at, what do I need to change in myself in order to adapt to life? And then once you do, that particular part of your past will be deactivated as a sounding board. Mm-hmm.
So online, Shailesh asks about concrete techniques to help our kids handle stress and pain. Would this technique be the primary one for kids as well?
This is one technique. I will talk about like several ways, because it's so important that you can adapt, you can change. Everything can change. You can learn anything, you can fix anything, because you can grow into your potentials. So yes, we will look at several strategies, because healing is when you stop repeating. It's very simple, because then you stop hurting yourself. When you have established a belief system about how life works and how you function in it, you will be operating based on those programs, and then you just continue hurting yourself. So learning how to be in harmony with life and then correcting your misunderstandings, that is how you heal anything. So, one thing is, of course, learning to not react. As I said, that's so important, to teach kids that there is a difference between what is actually happening and our reactions. Because teaching a kid, when it's like, he made me feel this way, he made me angry, and so on. No, this happened, and you chose the reaction of anger. That's in you. It's not an extension of what happened, because someone else could also observe what happened and would not react with anger. It's in you. And then you need to look at, why do you choose to react that way? And often, this is about suffering and the entitlement around suffering. This is the number one cause of anger. Now, suffering as a concept is the thought, it should have been different. Which, of course, is impossible. To me, suffering is ludicrous, because it's first saying that it should be different, and of course it isn't. And then you decide to have all sorts of reactions to your thought that it should be different. And the anger comes from the entitlement connected to that. I have the right for my version to happen. And it didn't, and it's your fault. So I will attack you because you stopped my version from happening. What we need to understand is when something happens, it's because there is no other alternative. This is very difficult for the human mind to accept because humans live in fantasy for the most part. Very few humans live in reality. How we survive is creating our own fantasy world, our own version of everything, and that's where we live. And we try to have a certain balance. If our fantasies become, too far off from reality, often we will correct ourselves. But still, most humans live in fantasy. So, the problem is when we want our fantasy about life to be true, and we feel entitled. And especially today, right, when we're consumers, we're used to having everything our way. The entitlement will accelerate. And then we also think it should be that way. It should have happened that way, and then we complain even more. So if we can understand that pain and suffering are two different things. Now, I can hurt my foot, that's pain. The suffering happens the moment I think it should have been different. This shouldn't have happened. Because then we begin to have all sorts of thoughts and emotions around it. And then we feel it's so unfair that this happened to me. Right? There is no alternative to reality. Once we grow spiritually, we understand that there is no alternative to reality and only reality actually happens. The rest is just fluff. Because when something happens, that is actually the full summary of everything present in that moment. But the reason why we developed suffering as a life form is because it's how we learn. Now, when I, for instance, in the old days, I hurt my foot. How do I learn? By saying, oh, right, it shouldn't have happened. So I begin asking questions. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Who was involved? Can I trust these people? Is it because of me? Is it because of someone else? What's really going on here? Because you need to build the map. You need to build the understanding in order to change, in order to adapt, in order to make sure that this will not happen again. Right? So we, in our minds, we create all these weaves, all these stories because it's how the brain learns. The brain will never relate to a piece of information based on what it is. It only understands it when it's placed in a context. Right? So we create stories and we weave everything together so our big mind map is one story. So if you think of it that you're basically making your own jigsaw puzzle. Everything you go through and you make up a story and then you see, does it fit? Not reality, but your own map. Because it's your own map and your own understanding that has helped you survive. So you're not measuring what you learn and seeing if it actually matches reality. It only has to match your fantasy version. So once we started building that map, we never stop. And that can be a problem, but from the point of evolution, we're supposed to do that because the ones with the most correct maps will survive and the rest will die. So today, though, we experience too much. And we're not able to make any of it fit. Right? Understand also that in the old days, right, because there were very few changes and things happening, it meant that most of your information would be correct. You would understand the tree stands over there, and this is that, and this is that, and you would live in the same environment your entire life. So you would know things, and they would not change. And when there was a change, you would understand it, right? And you could guess what it is, and you would have all your sense of giving you fear and curiosity and all of that, but you would figure it out, right? So In our brains, we will then, when we make our maps, we will map out as much as possible and we will test it out. But then there are things we don't know. This is where the religious part of the brain comes in, where we'll imagine and try to, oh, what could this be? We will be filling in the gaps with imagination, right? Because we're then trying to figure out what is the most probable version, right? Because we need to relate to it. It's the same thing. For instance, when you see a wild animal you haven't seen before, you'll say, what does this remind me of? If it's a panther, you can say, well, I've seen a tiger, I've seen a lion, okay, this is probably not something I should snack on, right? So you will use your imagination and your experience and your genetics to try to map things out. So you're supposed to do that. Today, when we understand less and less, it means that instead of having a tiny gap there and we map everything out, it's the opposite. You will have mapped out a few things and then you have huge gaps everywhere. Your brain says, well, hold my beer, right? And you will just fill it out. Looking at that point, well, that obviously means that it's like this. And it means that most of our maps will be completely bonkers. For some people, it's less bonkers. But we use our imagination a lot more now when it comes to mapping out what we think is reality. Because we understand less. We're more specialized and the world is bigger. Terrible combination. Which means we live even more in fantasy. This is part of why people are into conspiracy theories and all that. It's that. So it's more difficult for us to navigate. And how we can then grow out of this is that we need to simplify. We are not capable of dealing with the level of complexity that we're in without living in a complete fantasy and then suffering through it, because then everything should be different, because nothing matches what we believe. Understand, when we then have a life map that is completely off, and then we will feel that there is something wrong every time the map is not correct, because it should be. And then we just want to cancel reality, which is what we are experiencing right now in this civilization. It's extremely dangerous. We need to decide that I can always learn. I will change. I will adapt. And we need to embrace the notion that I'm always wrong. My map is not correct. I always tell people, you can choose between two things. You can be right or you can heal. You can't have both. And for most people, being right is more important. Right? And this is, again, we need to confront this in ourselves. We cannot trust our maps. You cannot trust your instincts. They're based on how people lived 200,000 years ago. Nothing is working. So we need to learn, we need to explore, and we need to be curious, and we need to correct ourselves. We need to look for correct information and then change our maps. Not trying to confirm our maps by fighting reality because it doesn't match our fantasies. This is the way out of suffering. This is the way out of this confusion and stress that people are experiencing, because, again, our maps are completely incorrect. It causes enormous stress. And then we suffer. And then we self-medicate. And then we do all of these things. A normal human is not equipped to deal with this world. But we can learn. But it means that we have to change our habits. We have to change what we do in our approaches. So, embracing and create affirmation around that I'm always wrong and I'm so happy about that. Because it means I can learn. I want to learn. I want to adapt. I understand that my growth requires a one-sided adaptation. I'm the one having to change. Reality will always show me what I have to do differently. I should never try to protect myself from it. I should never complain about it. Every time I complain, it's a sign that I'm not going to do anything about it, which means I'm not changing. And that's dangerous, especially today. So if I want to change, I have to stop complaining and bitching. I have to want to change. I have to look at myself every day and say, what part of my map can I change today? What part of my understandings do I need to replace? Right? So that's one approach. Do you have any more questions? Mm-hmm.
But come on, being right or that experience is so juicy. Ugh. But anyway, we do have a couple of questions here in the audience. Rick?
Okay.
Yeah, there is, this has been awesome. So much great information and constructive things that we can focus on instead. And I'm all for the simplifying thing, and I agree with everything. But there is just one aspect that my reaction when we're speaking about this, it's the assumption that everybody is walking around in pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, there are so many people who don't even realize that they are stressed, that they are in pain,
Mm-hmm.
and that they are suffering. And I was just thinking about, could you, I mean, there are so many people who don't even admit to it.
Yes, but the thing is, take away all their self-medication strategies and I would have them committed to a mental institution in one day. It's that. Because most people are now, at any given moment, applying several self-medication strategies at once. And it's, it's everything we do as humans now are about self-medication. Food has become self-medication. Shopping has become self-medication. Things, our jobs, careers, relationships. There is not a single thing, a single part of human existence that we have not turned into a strategy of self-medication so that we can pretend that we're happy and not really pay attention to anything, which again makes it even more difficult for us to change our maps. Right, because then we live even more in fantasy. I don't want to deal with this. This is so difficult for me. Oh, I need to drink. I need to relax. Oh, I need a me day. Blah, blah, blah. And I need to be seen. I need to be confirmed. All of that is self-medication. And it makes it impossible to adapt. Right, and that's what we're seeing. This is why we're in this days of self-medication. And we are, as a civilization, heading for the cliff. But we think, well, let's watch something else. Let's order pizza, because we are not relating to reality anymore. Right? And this is, again, when we start connecting to ourselves, we begin to feel all of this. And this is a funny thing in a way, because often when we start spiritual work, you will have enhanced levels of pain, stress, fear, and suffering. You say, shouldn't it be the other way around? Right? And it's basically, you're moving out of self-medication, which is you're finally starting to feel and sense what's going on. And then the instruction is, do something about it. And then you realize, oh, I completely forgotten how to do that, because I've not been told how to do it. All I've been told throughout my life is how to self-medicate. So I don't know how to do anything about anything anymore. Right? And this is where we're at as a civilization. This is why spiritual work and growth work is so incredibly important. It's the only way out of this complex. Yes, yeah?
Yeah, and this is where the interesting thing is, because when you're working on yourself and all of these aspects, and everybody else looks at you, but this is normal, and you're the one who's weird, and it's so normal to behave that way and not adapt to anything that's going on, or realizing that anything is going on. And yeah, so it's kind of frustrating because it kind of makes it hard, but also accepting that everybody, of course, is on their journey. But it's like, how can we help people? Do they even want to realize that they actually have a say in all of this that's happening, and they also have they can take charge and make a difference and change?
The challenge is that when you don't know what to do for your own survival, denial is the best strategy, right? Just pretend. Most people you talk to who claim they're happy are actually depressed, and when they're by themselves, they will feel terrible. When they're left to their own devices and their own thoughts, then it will be there. Most people find that to be a very dark place. And if not, it's because they are distracting themselves by all these different strategies. But it's denial, and they're just pretending. But when we look at our civilization, it's very easy to see that that's not healthy. Look at where we are at now. We're in the beginning of it. And what we're seeing manifesting globally is the result of this. Just look at some of the conflicts arising now based on people living in complete fantasy and making conspiracy theories into political policy, right? It's nuts, but this is what's happening. So we create all these stories about other people and countries, and we need to fight them because, right? So when we feel threatened, and this is the thing, through all of this, and we feel more pain and more stress and all that, we will project, because of course it's always other people's fault. So then you want to attack them, right? This is also what's happening when people are being triggered. They want to attack that person for saying or doing something that I don't like, because I shouldn't have to feel this way. And when that becomes political policy, you will be attacking to protect yourself, and it will be justified, which is what we're seeing. And we're in the beginning of it. So to help people, it's important to, I always say, we need to clean our own house. We need to set the example, and we need to do the work for real. We have to become real. We have to relate to reality. And this is also why I'm quite tough on everything from conspiracy theories and fantasies and religious belief system, all that, because it has to go. We need to relate to reality as it is and study it and be in harmony with that, not be in harmony with our own fantasies. Again, our default setting in our brain is that our map is true. As I said, we're supposed to believe that way because it's how reality experiments. It doesn't care if you dies. Think of it as the human life form trying to figure out different strategies, and the one with the best map will win. The rest will die. That is what evolution is about. So you're supposed to believe in your fantasies over reality, right? But where we are at today, it is not productive, right? So first, we need to learn to relate to reality and also look at our own strategies, anything from self-medication strategies, and understand that everything you do to soothe yourself, that's self-medication. Anything you do to distract yourself. And when you, for instance, eat from emotional reasons, that's self-medication. When we're not relating to what something actually is, and we feel justified based on how we feel, it's self-medication. Everything we do as humans now are part of those strategies because we don't want to relate to reality, and reality hurts. And we need to grow out of that. It doesn't mean that we should be in pain. The point is to understand why the pain is there and then make changes. why we feel certain things, certain ways, and then we do something about it. It's all about practical solutions, right? It's understanding always what is the cause of the pain. So think of all your existential pain as physical pain, just in a different way. And then there are always concrete solutions that we can look at. There are always things that we can learn, things that we can change. And getting really good at this, I think, is important, because this is how we can guide people. We should talk a lot less about our feelings, especially when they're negative. Oh, I feel this, or this is so difficult, blah, blah, blah. It's not a solution. When people complain, do not be part of it, right? So we need to cleanse out whatever in ourselves and our behaviors that will nurture a destructive behavior that will produce more fear and pain and stress and suffering. Because all these strategies will produce more of it. So we're in a vicious circle as a life form in this civilization. So we need to set a different example, but then we have to do the work ourselves, and it's really difficult. Because we need to challenge what we do in our motivation. And because most people are so deep into this, and our civilization is so difficult and harmful. So on the one side, we have a civilization that destroys everything, that is extremely vicious and harmful. And instead of doing something about that, we have the other side of the whole industry that produces self-medication. Right? With everything from entertainment to, like, you know, so we can continue our destructive ways without noticing. This is not very intelligent, right? And this is kind of the scariest part of where we're at as a civilization. It's this. Because when you look at it, it's two different things, right? It's half of it is destroying, being quite, you know, we could call it evil, although it's that ignorance, greed, aggression, all of that, and the rest is self-medication. It's all humans are doing at this point. So first we harm ourselves, and then we try to heal through medication and denial. So yes, most people are not aware of it, but they increasingly are feeling the pain and stress. Look at the rise of conspiracy theories, like the polarization, the aggression. Look at social media, right? There's nothing positive there for the most part, right? Look at politics. Look at the wars. What's happening? It's increasing because of this. So we have to do the work ourselves. And I always say, when we are on a spiritual path, we have to set the example. We have to do better. So it means you should not really be engaging in what makes your life worse. You need to take responsibility and make changes, real changes. And back to simplifying, try to also remember that your brain will relate to what you define as your extended body. Stop caring too much about things you can't do anything about. And this is a concrete tip. Your brain does not differentiate between something small and something big. The color red does not change whether it's, you know, this much or it fills the whole space. It's still red. Right, so for your brain, it's how you relate to the color red and what you do with it. So, instead of looking at everything in the world you can't change, look at the small things you can. Because the brain will not see the difference. So, often when you feel that life is chaotic and difficult, what you do, your life is a mess. Right? Because the outer things become so important, and then you mirror that in your life. You can reverse this, and this is one of the most important tips. Do something about what you can change and forget the rest. Look at your life. Look at the clutter. Look at, you know, the lack of order or cleanliness, organization, love, dedication. Do something about what you actually can change in your life. If it means cleaning your house more often, do that. You cannot clean up the environment And that can cause a lot of stress. You can clean your fucking house. You can eat better. You can be more orderly. You can become someone others can rely on, right? Be on time to your appointments. Set a higher standard for yourself. Live by true values. Try to make your home a place of beauty. Care about how you look. Take care of yourself. And then you can take care of the people around you. But do the work with yourself in your life first. And start with the smallest things. If you think like any of the things I just said are too much, too difficult, start with things you can do something about. When you make yourself a sandwich, make it better. Make it more beautiful. Choose a better plate, right? Set the table. Take care of your clothes, right? Just do things in a more productive way. Things for your brain. When you have order and productivity in your life, the world will look different to you. You will have less fear. You will have less stress. Because now you will be projecting that. Because you know, your brain will know, your DNA will know that, right, in what is my life space, I am competent. And it's, after all, in my life space, I'm surviving. This is my landscape where I study, where I adapt. And when I live my life masterfully, at least I will survive. I will grow. I will unfold. So you will start feeling more calm. You will have no stress because there will be very few differences between who you are as a person, what you do, and the results you get in your life. But it means you have to define what your life is. Because what we're doing today, when we are a mess as a person, we care a lot about the world around us, but we just yell and scream. Because we're not being productive in our own lives. So when we don't have a life space that is productive, we will automatically think that we need to relate to the bigger world. To justify it is like, look over there. This is more important. The environment. You should care about the environment of your life. The level of love, how you heal, how you contribute to bringing your space to the full potential. Because that's your job. You cannot change human nature. You cannot change collective karma. You cannot change that humans are moving in a certain direction because that is their consciousness. What you can change is your journey. Right? And it's that. So stop caring too much about what you can't change. And confront yourself, and when you care too much about, when you read something, ask yourself, can I change this? Is it, no, I can't? Okay, then forget about it. What does this remind me of in my own life that I can change? There will always be something. Is it, okay, can I do something about that? Yes, I can. Well, do that. You will find if you do this, you will be more balanced. You will be more productive. You will produce less stress and pain and fear. It's very simple. But again, through that, you will also set the example. The only way to get rid of fear, pain, stress, and suffering is by not producing it. It's that simple. And when you then have also corrected the errors of the past will no longer be the sounding board for these feelings. Right? And this is also how we learn to become more productive in our own lives. Because your life is your responsibility. Your path is your responsibility. And for you to bring that to fruition, that is your responsibility. And many people today, they get so scattered, right? And they look at everything in the world and they think that is their body. I should change the world. You can't. You're one person. And if you can't even change yourself, what the fuck are you doing? Right? The thing is, when we want to change the world, spiritual we understand, oh, I have to change myself first. But once you do, you don't want to change the world anymore because now you understand. You understand that you are on your path, so is everybody else, and they have the right to work on their karma and go through whatever it is they need. I don't have to react to that at all. Right? So once you focus more on what your job is, you will stop reacting. Very simple. So this is part of how you declutter your life. You have to do your own job. Do that first. And if you then feel like, oh, I have much more capacity, well, then we can talk about it. But then you will not be acting out of fear or the story that I need to change the world because it's scaring me. Then you will behave from the perspective, I figured out some, things that other people may benefit from. And you can offer that, but you will not react. You will not judge if they find that, no, they just want to continue what they're doing because they have the right. Right? But your life and your path will be cleaner and more productive, and you will be happy and balanced. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, we have a question in the audience.
I just want to go back to when you said that we don't want to see the reality and we have our maps. And if we do see the reality, that can also hurt that we have to change. So what I experience within myself and also others is that it can also be stressful. So it's easy to start that journey to change something, but it's not known. So it's sometimes easier to go back to the other stress that you know. So what's the difference? And how long
does it
time
take? Well,
does it take to change, or how can you know you're on the right, that it's worth it instead of going back?
Right.
Yeah.
Let me take the last thing first, that only reality exists. So when it comes to worth it, there's no alternative. Our spiritual journey is about the movement towards reality and being able to operate and exist in harmony with it. So there's no alternative to that. So when we want to go back to the other things, we are living in denial, and that will produce more of that stress and pain. And the further we go, the more of that will be produced. So the only way we can then move into a consciousness or space where things will be in balance is by us changing. And we will discover it at some point in a way that will make us want to move forward because we see it. We see that holding on to old ways will harm us. And most people, I think, in a spiritual awakening, they've already had experiences where even though it's painful to move forward, it's hell to move backwards. So we don't stop. And of course, yes, when we try to adapt, it can be even more painful because then reality is coming into the picture, and reality is not soft because it's math. And as I always say, you can never win a discussion with reality. You will always lose. So you need the mindset, and this is also part of spiritual discipline, going beyond the self, because only then will we have the intention of losing. But when we lose as the self, we're winning as soul. because it means every time we lose as self, we're moving closer to reality. So we embrace that and we want it, and we establish over time the absolute determination that I will keep going no matter what happens, no matter how much pain, because I know it's how I react to reality, which means I have to keep changing. It's the only way for the pain to go away. And you get better at it, right? So often what can happen is life will just show you something and you will have that, and then you change. You don't stay with the pain, you don't create suffering. You just understand, oh, I need to change something. What is it? And life will have already given you the information. So you will just like do that until it works. And you understand that there's no other way to do it. So in a spiritual awakening, you will get to that point. And I think, you know, with everything that's happening in the world, it can inspire people to move in that direction. More people will be consumed by their like destructive behavior and pain and stress and all of that, and their self-medication. And when you begin the process of awakening, you will start seeing what you're doing. You will begin to like, there is something here that's not right. But because of this collective strategy, it's very difficult to move past it. This is also why we're talking about it today with the wars going on and everything, because people will be experiencing this like stronger and stronger. And we need to inspire people and ourselves to now step out of this whole kind of paradigm of our civilization and learn that we can do this in a very different way, which means we can basically cancel out this whole complex and learn how to grow into reality in harmony and let other people be, right? And it's basically, I said, focus on our own garden, not the jungle out there, but we need to make our own garden work first, right? And that's when we simplify and also limit the amount of things that can influence us. Where so like, this does not belong to my journey. It can be people, you know, because again, today people relate to far too many people, right? Because you can ask yourself, I said, does this, you know, is this part of my journey? Is this who I am? And we can like make choices and then just cut it off, delete it. You know, do not let everything affect you. Only what you can change and interact with. So most people will be able to simplify their lives tremendously and figure out what actually matters to me, what matters to my growth, what matters to my heart, what will make me a better person, what will make me more happy, and choose that and master that. When you do, you will find this is very simple. Less distraction, less noise, less everything, which means you don't have to self-medicate anymore. You actually have a life you want to be in, right? So it's learning to grow into this, because again, there's nothing in our civilization, there's nothing in the culture, nothing in your DNA that can help you right now. You need to learn this. And a lot of the things I can teach you will go against your instincts, but they will work once you do them. And sometimes you have to fight to be able to do them. You need discipline. But there's no other way. It will not just happen by itself if you just wait for long enough, right? If you just lay on the sofa and have a snack, it will not happen. Growth work is real, and today it's more challenging than ever, right? Because our whole civilization, again, is completely off the hook. It's a collective mental illness that is real. So you have to change and grow out of that in order to get to a place in yourself where you can heal and be balanced. You cannot be part of the collective civilization the way normal people are and expect to become a balanced person in harmony with life. It's simply not possible. Any other questions?
Yes, on YouTube, it would be Kate. She seems to maybe struggle with a classic variant of this complex, which is being highly sensitive, high sensitivity. She's wondering, is there anything unique that you have to say about that particular variation?
Now, I've talked a lot about hypersensitivity in different seminars and stuff, but in this context, I would say that this is also when we believe that everything affects us. When you look at hypersensitive people, back to being a mess, not being productive, not being grounded, not being centered. Most hypersensitive people are not centered or grounded. And they feel that everything is affecting them. Yes, because they have defined everything outside of them to be important. They're not centered in themselves. And then they move into a state of victimization because they are then affected by everything. It's back to that. Believing that the world is so important. And then we're just sitting there being affected. Now, I always say this, that when we are too sensitive, think of you being you, your body and your space. When you're completely filled with your own essence, with what and who you are spiritually and as flow, it's full. You cannot be affected by anything. Then you can look at things, you can listen, you can choose. So if you think of you, for instance, if you're very sensitive, only being filled 40%. Your space, your cells, your body, everything. Your vibration, your information about who you are, just like DNA, right? It's what you vibrate. That information will be weak. And your body and your brain will always look to the strongest source of vibration and information. So when you are weak, and your cells are then exposed to vibration or energy field that is stronger than what you are offering yourself, your cells will start to try to vibrate that. Your brain, your mind will be drawn to that and try to adjust itself. So the more centered we are, the more we are basically channeling who we are spiritually, the more we let that flow come through, we will not be affected that way, because then your own information will be dominant. It's really that simple. But you also see, again, when people are very sensitive, they reinforce it by being so drawn out. They're affected by everything, right? So the key is to practice centeredness. Focus on your path, your journey, what you are here to do, and not turn yourself into the victim of basically everything. But many sensitive people, they have no idea who they are, what they're here to do. They don't have a sense of direction, and they don't know how to do it. It's all of that, and it comes with that state. So working with spiritual practices, really working on channeling your own flow, your own vibration, and filling yourself, your space, your life space with that, and kind of like let everybody else be. Because the thing is, when we have opinions about other people, or what they do, we're actually making them important. And then we're telling our bodies and our brains that, yeah, we should be influenced here, because when you have an opinion, you connect. So also when you're sensitive, most very sensitive people, they're extremely opinionated and judgmental. It comes with it. So it's learning how the ego adapts to a weakness in one's own flow. So it's really about reversing that by doing everything we can to be more centered, more true, really work on our own flow, our own kind of spiritual vibration, and try to let that fill us over time. That will change it. Every individual I've worked with hypersensitivity, they have gotten better over time. as they understand this and as they are able to practice it. It's the only way.
Yes, Anya sent us in an email earlier today that she has a fair amount of physical pain, and that she kind of sets her focus away from the pain and onto other things, and she experiences that the pain in a way becomes like a CD, like a compact disc playing in the background, and she forgets in a way that she has pain. And this can apply to both physical and mental pain. But her question is, I think this is a fascinating question, is she then able to actively work with the spiritual themes that are attached to the pain when her focus isn't, like when she's taken her focus away from the pain? So she's really curious about that.
Yeah, the thing is, again, pain is a signal. It's all it is. It's not a story. So, when we try to learn from the pain and figure out what do I have to do differently, and then try to do that, it is very productive. So it is always about avoiding the suffering part, avoiding the stories. Because when we're able to filter out the stories, we can always try to figure out what's actually going on. As I said, the brain learns through creating stories and narratives. It's how it figures stuff out. But since all the stories have to be compatible with our fantasies, today we run into problems. So we need to learn to not trust our stories, not trust our narratives, our take, our angle, and just try to filter that away and say, what is this objectively? It doesn't mean that we're able necessarily to see it objectively, but we're able to filter out more of our stories. And then, we just need to experiment, right? We should always try to reach for practical solutions and manifestations. Right? As I said, make physical changes. It has a tremendous effect on the brain. Like this simple thing, as I'm sure all of you are aware of. For instance, like make your bed every morning. Right? When people have no discipline and they just like make their bed, like, okay, it takes 1 minute. It changes how the brain feels about what you're capable of doing. Again, the small things. When we get better at the small things, we feel, oh, I'm capable, I have discipline. I can make decisions, I'm able to make changes. And then we can apply them to bigger changes and more complex situations. So it's always that, right? But there is no right or wrong approach, just to understanding the principle of what I'm saying and then just play around with it. Because what we can all agree upon is that no matter who we are, there's always room for improvement, right? You will always feel. You're not supposed to not feel. You will always have fear. You will always, experience stress. It's part of how the body operates. But we need to get it under control because the human body is now producing far too much of it. And when you want to wake up spiritually, this would get in the way. And your ego will completely run away with your whole attention and your whole life, right? So we need to understand how to work with this. Do we have any more questions?
Those are all the questions.
Good. Now, one other thing is, as I said, it's about taking responsibility, right? That one practice of stop blaming. Never blame, never complain, never criticize. Often when I give people this as an exercise, they'll last for about 20 minutes. Because what we say as people today is mostly that. Because we're in this state. But by trying and deciding, I will never do any of these things, you will notice when you say it and you will correct yourself. Because nothing good comes of it. It means that you are in a state of specialization. Everything else is someone else's responsibility. Take responsibility for everything in your life. Instead of criticizing, say, okay, good for them. Now, what can I do? What is my take on this in my life? Right? And it's also when something happens, this is also a way to go beyond all our stories, because it creates a lot of stress and suffering. Instead of, like, when something happens, we always begin, in our brains to look at why did this happen, blah, 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 whose fault, all of that, to try to map it out. And so instead of that, try saying, well, that happened. Where do I go from here? No explanation, no nothing. It's just, this happened. I'm now standing in this point. Where do I go from here? What do I do from here? Do not involve anyone else. Right? Train yourself, whatever happens. And I've had so many people over the years being caught up in these stories about their upbringing and people. They do this and this and this, and because of that, then I can't. And my answer is always, it doesn't matter who brought you to this point. You are the only one walking from here. And you can. And it's that. Right? Once we take responsibility, we discover that, nothing is holding us back. When we blame, we're actively blocking ourselves by pretending someone else is holding us back. So, when we stop criticizing and blaming and all of that, and we take responsibility, there's only what actually happens, and then what comes next. Try that. We'll be surprised, number one, to how easy it is and how difficult it is at the same time. So decide to completely eliminate the stories about others. It's uninteresting because you are where you are, right? If someone hits you in the face, okay, but then that happened. You're the one having to live with it. You're the one having to decide what happens next. Right? Always see that life is moving forward. When something has happened, it's in the past. It's uninteresting. It's only how do you avoid repeating? What did life show you that you need to do in a different way? Life will only show you your imbalances, right? And your where there's room for improvement. And then you can try that. There's only you and there's only your path. So try that. Another thing that is interesting, I've mentioned it, it's try to learn from everything. I've said this many times, but the brain is very strange when it comes to this because we don't like to learn. We like to learn to the point where we can understand our map. And when we have decided on the map, which is mostly fantasy, all we then seek is confirmation that this is the right map, because after all, we made it. We put in a lot of effort to make this map. So now we just want to have it confirmed, right? It's like a child making, a painting or a drawing, showing it to mom. He does not want an art critic. He wants confirmation. This is the most wonderful painting ever, darling, right? And we'll put it up here on the fridge, right? That's the only correct answer. So once we think that we're capable, that we have skills, we only want confirmation. And that's when competition kicks in, right? We want to be right. Our version should win. That is basically what competition is about. It's about my map is more correct than yours. So we have this in us. So we are willing to learn until we feel that, yeah, I got it now. This is good enough. Now I want confirmation. So for most of us, that happens early. And especially now, remember that when we have a map that relates to reality, right, we will always see, oh, yeah, I need to change that, need to change that, because you are in communication, right? As I said, when we have a map that 90% is based on your observations and interactions, and the rest is what you make up. Today, when it's the opposite, where 90% of it is what you make up and 10% is based on actual observation and interaction, you get more attached to that because you don't get it corrected. Because when you have something that is directly related to reality, you will see, when you make that kind of overlay, you will see that you need to change it. When it's something you've made up, there's nothing to correct it, right? Because it does not connect to reality. So you then want confirmation even sooner. And normally you would want confirmation in those 10% that you've made up. Now we want it in the 90%. And we don't want to learn because it means that we're wrong. And when we made something up ourselves, it's more sensitive, so we disconnect from reality because it's a threat. Right? When we decided that something is true to us, reality is a threat. So the fantasy part of the map is now a threat to human existence. And it's a threat to our own awakening. Because this is where we have all our illusions and stories and this and that. And we make up shit all the time. Back in the day, it was a better balance. Right? And we have to understand that this is because of our current civilization. And it's very difficult. So today, when we make things up, we want confirmation. We're more biased. We only seek what can confirm us. And you see this in public discourse. We see it in how people behave. Social media and what type of information they seek out. We want confirmation because we live in fantasy. So we have to decide to not do that. And the easiest way is to decide that I want to learn. I'm not interested in confirmation. I want to be proven wrong. That is important when we want to learn, when we want to study. It is to come across something that changes how we think, what we believe to be true. So we seek out what will prove us wrong. This is a scientific approach, and we need to adapt it. Because otherwise, you will subconsciously walking around in a world where you see confirmation and where you reject anything that contradicts your fantasy map. Most people live in that state. And this is also, again, what we're seeing in the world today. You need to do the work. You need to decide that I want to learn. I want to be proven wrong, and that's exciting. Because that's what learning means. You can learn from anything because every situation, every single experience will contain information that can potentially correct your map, correct your understanding of something. But then you need to want it, right? You must seek it. You're like, what can I learn here? And know that the only thing that is ever happening is life trying to show you how to grow, which means any interaction will contain the information about what you can improve and also where to go, right? So it's basically addressing your resistance, your karma, but also your potential. Every single experience. So if we actually want to learn, our own life is basically gold mine. But the moment we see confirmation, we see nothing and we learn nothing. Right? So learning from everything is also a technique. It's something we also, when it comes to kids, try to teach them that being wrong is good. when we discover that there is more than we believe, that's wonderful. It means that our reality just got bigger. We got a bigger landscape. Our world is growing, right? And it's also teaching kids that that is an exciting thing. Back to how to deal with the little things. Try to look at your reactions and discipline the little things. So, don't get angry for little things, you know? And it's the same approach. Look at the insignificant things where you get angry, where you have a negative reaction. Try to say, meh, that's not important. What you're then teaching yourself in your brain is to not react with anger. And then that will apply when shit hits the fan, because the brain does not see the difference. It's such an important key to understand that we can make all the changes in the little things. But often we think, well, we have to do the big things because they matter. But the thing is, you can't change the big things, and then you neglect the small things. While the intelligent way is to do the opposite. Change the small things. Change your behavior, your reactions in the small things, because those are the easiest, and they will still train your brain in how to approach the bigger things. Right? Try to look at this in your life and explore it as a principle. When you get it, it's a real eye-opener. So remember that your brain will go through several hundred reactions per minute normally. Everything, every sensory piece of information will have some form of reaction. Everything that happens. And when you apply some of these perspectives that we've been talking about today, your brain will see the world differently. It will want the correction. It will want to learn. It will embrace the expression from other people in their journeys, and you will focus on your own. And say, of course they are doing that. That's their journey. Well, what was I doing? What's important to me? And you will focus on that. You will focus on the little things. You will balance yourself. It's not really that difficult. But understand, the less competent you are in your own space, the more competent you believe that you are in other people's spaces. It's very peculiar. Right? And it's like the stronger opinions you have about something, the less you know. It's always like this. An intelligent person will hardly ever have strong opinions about anything because they learn. They understand that in this situation there's something I don't know. If I am to attach my own opinions, I will not learn. Right? So there is something about noticing our own ways of thinking and our own behavior. And noticing when we are expressing ourselves in such a way that it is obvious that we're ignorant and that we're acting from a place that is not productive, we can correct it. One other thing, when it comes to fear, one exercise I give people is always imagine the worst possible outcome. When you imagine worst case scenarios and really try to look at them, and then you say, okay, if that were to happen, what do I do? Because fear will make you go like, oh, it's so terrible, you know, all of that. That's not a solution. Just like judgment is not a solution. Just like I mentioned that when we are in these negative patterns, and when we judge something, the brain believes that you've actually done something productive. You will not learn. Because judgment is you being right. So you're rejecting learning. So when we pass judgment, it's always blocking any growth potential. We're not learning. And we will get reward chemicals. as if we've done something very productive. So it's quite addictive because it means you can pass judgment and create a side to be a bitch. And you will get reward chemicals as if you've done a great job. But you will not learn anything. Right? We need to understand how our brain works. So also stop judging. That's basically also being in your opinions. Now, when you think through worst case scenarios and you go there and you do it without story, you're just like, okay, what could actually happen? How do you deal with that? What would I actually do? And focus on the doing, not how you will feel, not how much pain it will be, blah, blah, blah. And then that happened. You know, just look at what would I actually do from a practical level. And just force yourself to see, what would I do? And then you do that, and then what? What would you do then? Okay, what's the next step? Until you see that you kind of figure out a pathway. And it's also, if you want to attack your own stories, is basically when something happens, you have this story. It's like, okay, what's the story? What's so terrible about this? You say, well, because of blah, blah, okay. And then what? What's so terrible about that? Well, because of that, blah, blah, okay. And then what's so terrible about that? And you basically just ask yourself, so what, so what, so what? Until you have explained your whole story and it sounds ridiculous. Often when it comes to fear stories, it's the same thing. You're very afraid of something and say, okay, what are you exactly afraid of? And often it's just a feeling. And then you say, okay, and then what's so terrible about that? And often when you ask that question, you force yourself to explain it after like 3 levels, you have no idea. It's like the Truman Show. You have created this is so terrible. And I've done this exercise with people who have been in deep fear of something for years and they have no idea why they are afraid. They have no rational explanation. And it's that you have to force yourself into the rational explanation. And you will find that it's just bullshit. So when we do this, we can feel that, okay, I don't have to be afraid because now I know what to do. A lot of fear is about not knowing what to do. That we feel overpowered, overwhelmed. And when we go into this, imagine the worst thing that can possibly happen again and again and again. We are training ourselves to become competent. And we understand that every situation, there is a way out. Because there is a practical solution to every single problem. Life is math. There is always an answer. There's always a way. And of course, the most important thing of all, lift your consciousness. Zoom out, because again, when you have a reaction to something and you see something, it's because you don't see the full picture, right? Learn to lift your consciousness so you see a bigger picture. Then you will see that it's not that difficult, it's not that dangerous, it's all stories, right? Once you learn to work with your consciousness and expand and lift and zoom out and look at it, you will see beyond the map in your mind. You will see beyond your fantasies. You will start seeing how life operates. And you will see that it's one organism. Life is one. Life knows what it's doing. It's an organism expressing itself, and we're part of it. So we can let go of all of this nonsense that is fear and stress and pain and suffering. Because it's us being in a very subjective point, in a subjective reality that is not compatible with what actually is. So lifting your consciousness will help you soften that and detach yourself from that and be able to observe things more correctly. So back to spiritual practices, back to meditation, right? Back to having spiritual disciplines that will allow you to go beyond the self, going beyond your body, going beyond your programmings. Because beyond it, it's so much easier to be in harmony with life, in harmony with nature, and then life will show you. Life already has a plan. Life is already in one continuous organic expression, and you're a part of it. So everything that you are, your entire path, your entire existence, is part of this. Which means no matter where you are, no matter what you do, no matter what happens, life already has a plan. And when we can lift our consciousness, and when we can start relating to it by going beyond the self, going beyond the ego, by zooming out, we can get a sense of everything is okay. This is what is. This is what is going to happen. This is how life expresses itself. And we will feel centered, we will feel calm. And we will understand why things are happening the way they are. And we'll embrace them and love them. And we will move out of reaction into co-creation, where we can actively connect with the expression of life that we're part of and not resist it at all. We can embrace it because now we understand. The only way to get to that understanding is through spiritual practices and spiritual disciplines. So that is the ultimate tool. That's what I will leave you with. If you do not have a spiritual practice, really try to establish one. Meditate every day. Learn practices that can assist you beyond the self, no matter what they are. Our whole culture and civilization is completely engulfed in the ego and the destructiveness and this trying to fix the destructiveness. There's no solution to that. You have to lift your consciousness. You have to expand. It doesn't happen by itself. So please learn a spiritual practice. Learn how to meditate. Learn whatever type of practice you're into, but do it thoroughly. And over time, it will lift you beyond all of this. You're a spiritual being. You're on a human journey. But you don't need any of that crap. You don't need the fear and pain and stress and suffering. You can need them as signals, but they should not be your life. So learn through spiritual practices to lift yourself above this collective level of humanness. And let yourself be incarnated as a spiritual being in human form. And then everything in your life will be open. The unfoldment will be there, the love will be there, and you will see that absolutely everything that happens only serves the purpose of expanding you, of healing you, helping you grow, so you can become everything you are spiritually, also in your human form.
Thank you so much, IKYA. And I will leave you tonight with that tomorrow evening, IKYA Mantra Collection 5, our newest course, has its first teaching. And this course is actually exactly what IKYA addressed here at the end of tonight's IKYA Live episode, and that is spiritual practices. Mantra meditation is one of the most classic forms of spiritual practice in human history. IKYA will also expand on IKYA mantras and help us to develop both discipline and practice throughout an entire year of studying directly with him. So don't miss out on this just outstanding opportunity that is in alignment with assisting you in dealing with the pain, fear, suffering, and stress that we're all overwhelmed with. So go and check it out at our website, ikya.org, and learn everything you need to know and join us and sign up. The first teaching is tomorrow night. Also, follow us on social media, ikya.official on all the channels, subscribe here on YouTube, and please share tonight's episode with anyone who might benefit. Everyone, every human being is dealing with stress, fear, suffering, and pain. So tonight's episode could assist absolutely everyone. All right. Thank you from all of us here at IKYA Center. We look forward to seeing you next Monday at 19 o'clock or 7 p.m. Oslo time for our next episode of IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective. Until then, be well.